Okay, we're back in the studio. First session of the day. I have with me Dan Truman of Duga Digital, agency founder like myself, and I have the infamous Matty Two Shoes. Are we going to share your real name, or we stick with Matty Two Shoes?
I think it's pretty obvious who I am at first.
So we're going to have a talk about hiring people, and we have different perspectives. So you've recently hired a third person internally for the internal analytics team. We'll get to that. And then you and I have both been going through growing our agency. So we're both at around like 4 or 5 people, I think, right now. Yep. So different perspectives, but same goal, right? We want to achieve something, and we've realized we are going to need more people to achieve that. And then we've gone through the process of including more people in our organization. Let's start with you then. So you started out freelancing like me, I think. Yep. What was the first reason to start hiring?
So yeah, you're right. I started out freelancing. I was doing all right with that, quite happy. Eventually you end up in a situation where you're doing all of the work and all of the payments, and everything becomes a bit too on you. And then, to be honest, the tipping point was I landed what I'd call a whale client, where there was no way in heck I was going to be able to do this myself, whether I stayed up all night. And actually, it was, that tipping point just said, right, okay, I need to get more people in, or I need to do something. And yeah, it was more capacity led me there, rather than, we'll probably come onto skill sets in a bit, but it was more capacity that got me to the point of, okay, we need to hire because there's an expectation here. The clients ask for a lot more. How can I do that? I need more people.
Was there ever a moment when you thought, I could also say no to the client? I could stay small, I could stay Dan, just Dan doing Dan things by itself?
Dan doing Dan, yeah, I mean, potentially. I mean, that's what they bought, right?
Yeah.
That's what the conversation is, and you probably have the same thing. And even internally, I know I've done this on the client side as well. They're buying you, they're buying your ideas, they're buying your strategy, your abilities. You're asking the question, can I say no? Not to that money, Rick, no.
Oh, okay, so there was an incentive to try it, right? And it was worth it to take the leap of hiring your first.
Yeah, I mean, I never really went out with the idea of becoming an agency.
Yeah.
I don't know if you did, and I'd love to hear if you did it or not, but you just sort of go, because I think we've been in the industry for a similar amount of time, and you kind of go, all right, yeah, maybe I'll try this. I feel like, and this is why I call myself an accidental business owner, because it was a complete accident. I worked with a really large company that I needed more hands, and they were expecting that. So yeah, that was the reason that got me there. It wasn't, I'd love to say it was really intent, but it wasn't.
Yeah, interesting. For you, how has it been expanding your team? What is the main reason that you expanded your team?
The reasoning behind that was pretty simple. We're a team of 2, and as most often cases within a pair, just mathematically, there's a big risk that someone falls away for a period of time, whether it's personal reasons or even something like pregnancy, which was the case in our team. And so you're immediately then in a situation where there's only one person. And then you never really want that, because then the risk of only having one, which both of you know very well, is that everything then falls away when that person is on vacation, sick, etc. So they wanted an extra level of security for that, and also distribution of work was also just a way to manage work a little bit differently within the team, and also focus. When 2 people are able to clear their plates and actually work on topics, and have a third person doing a little bit more of the coordination and handling kind of that more centralized in a kind of way, that also leads to better efficiency gains for the company. So the third person kind of unlocks something that's a little bit more than just a third person, I think. Yeah. So that was the reasoning behind that.
Yeah, I really recognize that at us as well, the third person. But starting off, I think I had a different reason why I went from freelance. It's simply, I was doing fine, and it was good money for, like, the work to money relation was very healthy, right? And the amount of time was very good. But I just noticed, like, I got bored. And I was like, if I'm not going to make a step now, then maybe I need to go work in-house somewhere or do something else at least, right? Because I felt like if I continue to do this, I'm not challenged anymore. And the entrepreneurial challenge, so being a freelancer and being an entrepreneur are two different things in my opinion. There's a lot of overlap, but as long as you're not responsible for paying somebody else's salary, you're not an entrepreneur yet, right? So there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, at least to me.
Yeah.
But I felt like that was an interesting challenge for me to, I am now ready to do that. And it had been something that was in my mind for a long time already. So it was more from that reason that I was like, okay, let's take the leap and try to do that. So interesting, like different dynamics.
Yeah.
What you just said about the third person, I really recognize that because like two people still a liability, right? And the third person really unlocks a lot. Also in the mental capacity. I don't know if that makes sense. Like it feels like you can spend more time on research and development, sort of. I see you both nodding.
And I think sales as well. And this is maybe, and internally it helps as well. Yeah. So having a team internally. So I used to work at TUI Group, the big holiday firm in Europe mostly. Yeah. And I had a team there of 8 and then a dotted line team of about 40. And internally, going a step change, we went from 4 up to 8. And even that capacity, being able to work out what else is going on in the business, how else can we help, just step away from the day-to-day, step away from and be strategic, giving you that time back. Because otherwise you're putting out fires or you're doing lots of things.
Busy
like
work, right?
Yeah, exactly. You could make yourself busy all day long. It's a 70,000 person company. You could be busy all the time. Yeah. The challenge with agency side and building that agency out, and maybe Rick, you have this as well, is, and I've got a terrible story that I'll tell you in a minute, is it's still all on you for sales.
Yes.
And that's the challenge I have at the moment. It's not necessarily, and I haven't hired for that yet. That's probably something to come on to, but that's the real thing is, like you say, Matty, if we go away, sales go away.
Yeah.
Business goes right down. And the horrible story is that 2 days after my daughter was born 9 months ago, we were in hospital and I took a sales call. And my wife has never let me forget it. Yeah. But I had to say to her, look, this is potentially 5 figures. This is, well, actually, I think it was 6 figures. This is what we need for the company. Yeah.
Well, I did the flip side of that. So I did the other side of that experiment. After my daughter was born, I took 3 months off, fully off. And then 3 months after that, I was still kind of off. And things went really well. So we were 2 full-time employees at that moment, and they handled the clients perfectly. But what I didn't realize is I had never thought about sales as the concept of sales. Yeah. I just was being Rick, talked to people that generated sales. But I only realized that later. Yeah. And sales in our business, it's not like you sell something today and you start tomorrow. It's like there's a lead time, right? It takes, let's say, 3 to 6 months before you go from first talk to first invoice. So after my hiatus, I realized that everything dropped down. So that was a very good, expensive, very worthwhile lesson, though, because I had a lot of fun being so close to my daughter growing up those first couple of months. But yeah, so I did the test, and turns out, indeed, you are the bottleneck of your business. But I think, and you will probably also notice this, the bottleneck just shifts, right? So you hire a person to do something, and then you do the rest, right? So you kind of shift the problem around. I don't know if it will ever stop.
But I mean, as you said about this like mental load part, that's really the thing, is that with 2 people, you're both kind of juggling everything. Yeah. So you end up having to split your mental load across many different types of things. Internally, the sales analogy would be talking to stakeholders and trying to figure out what they really want, and we could go into the whole topic of that, but that's a different thing. And then when you have that third person or the 4th, 5th, and it unlocks this way for you to free up that time, it just shifts that time from those 2 people who were doing it haphazardly and unplanned to the third person who can do it diligently with some kind of a process, maybe that's what we do. And that really frees up. It's not necessary. I mean, there are definitely efficiency gains to be had.
Yeah.
I don't think they're crazy, like 50% or something, but there's definitely an unlocking effect there.
Well, you touched on something that I definitely want to talk about. So you mentioned a process, right? A term often used at the agency side, standard operating procedures, right? I think there's also something to the first people you hire need to be a little bit different than as you grow. I think you're able to hire more niche specialist people, so really super organized people, really focused on one topic. As you are a little bit bigger, at the beginning you need a little bit more, I can do it all. What role does process play for you guys? And I want to start with you. So internally, is it like, did you go from two generalists handling everything to now having more like structured ways of doing things, or was that already the case for you?
I do think that your first couple hires need to be quite scrappy.
Yeah,
in the
scrappy,
sense,
that's a good word.
In the sense that they need to be able to do a lot of things. But I think that's dictated by company size. We're 35 people internally.
Yeah.
So we're not at that level where you can say, oh, the third or the fourth or the fifth person can be specialized into one domain of the business or one particular skill set yet. So our third person we've hired is still very much a generalist. Though, I have to say, because they've taken on that coordinative role, this person is doing that kind of split that a team lead might do, where they're like managing the team in the sense of distributing tasks and working on that process of how the team actually works, but also doing analytical tasks. And that's something that is very difficult to maintain for a very long time usually. Yeah. But that person really likes doing that, and so that's why we hired them.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because my experience, there is not a lot of technical talent who also enjoys organizing stuff.
That's
I
right.
think those are a little bit harder to find.
And maybe that's the kind of niche that you were speaking about before, is that that's their talent, is being able to do both of those things and do both of them well and like both of them.
Yeah, especially the like part.
That's the trifecta, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where you have to sort of, as an agency or even internally, start providing guardrails and guiding frameworks for those people, right? So you can get the maximum out of them, but they know where they sit, and they're happy there. Yeah. And that's the management part, that's the leadership part, that's the whole talent acquisition is, I know I need this gap filled. How can I make that gap enjoyable, attractive? How do I bring that in? And then also, how do I land and expand in there? So to have someone scrappy, ideally you want someone who's going to be able to do the thing you need and see other areas that they can go into and move in there. Not always the case. So yeah, for us, we have standing operating procedures for everything, from how to book a meeting. If we don't send out an agenda, it probably will get cancelled. Like just small things that mean that we don't have to go backwards and forwards doing various different tasks over and over again, because time is our money. So yeah, we have standard operating procedures, which I think also clients take you more seriously with that, or at least you can force better behaviours out of clients, which may be a better way of saying that, because there's an expectation set and they know where they stand in that. And also everyone in the company then comes on this journey with, sorry, that was horrible. You're working together towards the same goal. Yeah. And then that goal is made really clear.
To what extent are you a very organized person yourself?
I wasn't when I was doing my freelance stuff, because I think I'd love to hear your experience of it, but I was just scatty and I was basically throwing everything here, there and everywhere. But generally, yes, very organized. Yeah. And want to build that up. And I think that organization and process and structure is where companies are formed. Companies are effectively just bunches of people coming together doing the same thing in one goal, and you need to be able to structure that, because otherwise we fall out of routine. That's why humans love routine so much, right? Well,
so I think that, so that's interesting. So I am the opposite. I am very unstructured, really? Chaotic, you could say. Creative would be the positive.
You can tell, right?
I mean, pure chaos. I mean, all of this is definitely not organized in any way whatsoever.
I just show up here to interview people. The rest is organized by other people. No, but I very much so. I really desire structure sometimes when I'm in my most chaotic. But my biggest output always comes out of chaos, and that's just a trend that continues to return. And what I've noticed is I've hired really senior people that that handle themselves, and that has now been. I've now turned that into official company policy after realizing that that was unconsciously what I was doing, because I am very bad at telling them what to do exactly. I don't think that would work in our company. So we have very little standard operating procedures or any of that. So we really rely on the individual capacity. But the funny part is I'm starting to notice the limitations of that, especially if we have to collaborate, right? So if we don't work individually on a client or on a project, then you start to notice the challenges of that aspect. And as you may have seen in Krista Seiden's presentation, we work together with her team for American clients. And she has Elizabeth, who is the technical project manager. Yeah. And she basically takes that role for those clients. And that works really well. But I noticed that is not a capacity we have internally. And I think that is because it is very much opposite to who I am. So I think as a leader, you kind of, that's what you create around you. Yeah. But it's going to be interesting for me to see. I think we will need to have some form of process, but I think I will have to hire a person who loves process.
Makes the process.
Yeah, but also loves the process.
But this is like the blind spot thing, right? Yeah. You, as a good leader, you are the type of person who knows what your blind spots are, and because you know what they are, you hire someone for those blind spots, right? Yeah. Well, eventually, right? And I think, but it's also like, it is about reflecting, right? And you can go pretty far doing just the stuff you're good at until you run into a wall somewhere, right? And that's when you start to adjust. But I think it's funny to see, because I've had many chats with other agency owners, and there's so many different flavors. And I think definitely up until like 10 people, you can basically, everything works. Like there's a lot of roads that will get you there. Yeah. And not necessarily good or bad, just different. But after a certain point with more than 10 people, I think you will need some form of structure for it to function. I think internally or agency side, there's like an expectation you set of how you work by who you bring in, what kinds of people they are, and what and the audience. Like their expectations need to be set so that you can work well. Yeah. Otherwise, like you say, you end up butting heads and going, actually, this is never going to work. Yeah. I think the type of people you bring in as well kind of reflect your brand as an agency anyway, and maybe internally too. So that it's always people with people. Yeah. Like we're in a professional setting, we're in services, we're going to have people with people. We just need to make sure that they're the right communicators. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of soft skills that we haven't talked about. Yeah. Where, like you say, the more senior people, I think we do exactly the same thing. Doug won't mind me saying, bring in senior people, and that's the old people. Seniors, just seniors, not senior people. We bring in senior people, and you have less, I guess, governance for them. But it just covers a bunch of the basics because they have been working for a while. They have run into more problems, so they know how to handle themselves doing work in general, regardless of the specific skill, right? Yeah. But that's an interesting one. I would like to ask you guys about. How about hiring juniors, training juniors? What's your experience with that? So it's very contrarian, but I actually prefer hiring people without experience. Do you define experience both years in general working or in the specific field you're talking? To that specific, in our case, analytics, years of experience in analytics, because it's a little bit like baking a cake, is that with junior people, you have kind of all the raw ingredients there and it hasn't really been fully formed yet. So you have a chance to shape how that person and mold how they become. Yeah. And that's a very impactful process for you as a company and for them as a person, which is very rewarding. But it also yields really high value individuals. And that's happened in the past. I've had that on 2 occasions now, where we've hired someone with very little work experience and very little analytics experience. So they haven't been, jaded by the industry, and they haven't been subjected to all the horrors that we have yet, which is great. And then you have a chance to really mold them. And I think the thing that we look for in that situation is that kind of drive and that energy for self-learning, because if they don't have that, they're probably not going to get very far. Because we can't just throw stuff at them, right? They need to have that self-drive and curiosity and all those things that we talk about as analyst properties or data engineer properties, whatever they decide to do.
Yeah. So I just mentioned we don't hire juniors at the moment, and I think there's a distinct reason for that, and probably the same one you have, Rick, is when you're paying someone else's mortgage/salary, you haven't got time necessarily. You're being paid on that time, and it's your company.
Yeah.
But I did set up the analytics department at Brain Labs Digital, and there, the whole philosophy for the entire company was go out to red brick universities in the UK and around the world, so good quality universities around the world. Find people who weren't necessarily going to go into banking, solicitor, or anything else, and wanted this different experience and to go into digital marketing. So really switched on young guys and girls, and see if they wanted to come in. And so I had a team of flat out, straight out of university, never had any work experience, and that was amazing because, like you say, the fledgling. Sorry, that's probably demeaning, but the junior view of the world was actually really good to get back into you as well, because it invigorates you.
Fresh energy.
And fresh questions.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at it through a completely different lens. They're not jaded. I'm going to use the word trauma. They don't have the trauma. They haven't gone through all of the regulatory pieces of the last few years. So there is a vibe there, and I think it is different when someone else is paying their salary.
Yeah.
Compared to when
I think you need a certain company size for it to work.
Yeah.
Right? Like we have the exact same philosophy. It doesn't work when you're so small because it's just too much overhead.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm getting signals here that we need to cut off. I think we can continue this conversation later on today. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks for having us. Yeah,
really good.
Bye, everyone.